Chapter 21 of The Money Moon. This recording is in the public domain. The Money Moon, a Romance, by Geoffrey Farnell. Chapter 21 Of Shoes, and Ships, and Sealing Wax, and the Third Finger of the Left Hand. So Bellew took up the paper. The house was very quiet, for Small Porges was deep in the vexatious rules of the multiplication table, and something he called "Jogafrey." Anthea was out, as usual, and Miss Priscilla was busied with her numerous household duties. Thus the brooding silence was unbroken, save for the occasional murmur of a voice, the jingle of the housekeeping keys, and the quick, light tap tap of Miss Priscilla's stick. Therefore Bellew read the paper, and let it be understood that he regarded the daily news sheet as the last resource of the utterly bored. Now presently, as he glanced over the paper with a negative interest, his eye was attracted by a long paragraph beginning: "At St. George's, Hanover Square, by the Right Reverend the Bishop of Sylvia Cecile Merchmund, to His Grace the Duke of Ryde, K.G., K.C.B." Below followed a full, true, and particular account of the ceremony which, it seemed, had been graced by royalty. George Bellew read it half way through, and yawned, positively and actually yawned, and thereafter laughed. "And so I have been in Arcadia only 3 weeks. I have known Anthea only 21 days. A ridiculously short time, as time goes, in any other place but Arcadia, and yet sufficient to lay forever the haunting spectre of the Might Have Been. Lord, what a preposterous ass I was! Baxter was quite right, utterly and completely right. Now, let us suppose that this paragraph had read: "To day at St. George's, Hanover Square, Anthea Devine to—" No, no, confound it! And Bellew crumpled up the paper, and tossed it into a distant corner. I wonder what Baxter would think of me now, good old faithful John. The haunting spectre of the Might Have Been. What a preposterous ass, what a monumental idiot I was!"
"'Posterous ass' isn't a very pretty word, Uncle Porges, or continental idiot,"
said a voice behind him, and, turning, he beheld Small Porges somewhat stained, and bespattered with ink, who shook a reproving head at him. "True, nephew," he answered, "but they are sometimes very apt, and in this instance, particularly so." Small Porges drew near, and, seating himself upon the arm of Bellew's chair, looked at his adopted uncle, long, and steadfastly.
"Uncle Porges," said he, at last, "you never tell stories, do you? I mean lies, you know."
"Oh, indeed I hope not, Porges. Why do you ask?"
"Well, 'cause my Auntie Anthea's 'fraid you do."
"Is she? Why?"
"When she came to tuck me up last night, she sat down on my bed, and talked to me a long time, and she sighed a lot, and said she was 'fraid I didn't care for her any more, which is awful silly, you know."
"Yes, of course," nodded Bellew.
"And then she asked me why I was so fond of you, and I said 'cause you were my Uncle Porges that I found under a hedge. And then she got more angrier than ever, and she said she wished I'd left you under the hedge."
"Did she, my Porges?"
"Yes, she said she wished she'd never seen you, and she'd be awful glad when you'd gone away. So I told her you weren't ever going away, and that you were waiting for the Money Moon to come, and bring us the fortune. And then she shook her head, and said, 'Oh, my dear, you mustn't believe anything he says to you about the moon, or anything else, 'cause he tells lies.' And she said lies twice."
"Ah! And did she stamp her foot, Porges?"
"Yes, I think she did. And then she said there wasn't such a thing as a Money Moon, and she told me you were going away very soon, to get married, you know."
"And what did you say?"
"Oh, I told her that I was going too. And then I thought she was going to cry, and she said, 'Oh, Georgy, I didn't think you'd leave me, even for him.' So then I had to 'splain how we had arranged that she was going to marry you so that we could all live happily ever after. I mean, that it was all settled, you know, and that you were going to speak to her on the first opportunity. And then she looked at me a long time, and asked me, was I sure you had said so? And then she got awful angry indeed, and said, how dare he? Oh, how dare he? So, of course, I told her you'd dare anything, even a dragon, 'cause you are so big and brave, you know. So then she went and stood at the window, and she was so angry she cried, and I nearly cried too. But at last she kissed me good night, and said you were a man that never meant anything you said, and that I must never believe you any more, and that you were going away to marry a lady in London, and that she was very glad, 'cause then we should all be happy again, she s'posed. So she kissed me again, and tucked me up, and went away. But it was a long, long time before I could go to sleep, 'cause I kept on thinking, and thinking, supposing there really wasn't any Money Moon, after all. Supposing you were going to marry another lady in London. You see, it would be all so frightfully awful, wouldn't it?
Terribly, dreadfully awful, my Porges."
"But you never do tell lies, do you, Uncle Porges?"
"No."
"And there is a Money Moon, isn't there?"
"Why, of course there is."
"And you are going to marry my Auntie Anthea in the full of the moon, aren't you?"
"Yes, my Porges."
"Why then, everything's all right again. So let's go and sit under the haystack, and talk about ships."
"But why ships?" enquired Bellew, rising.
"'Cause I made up my mind this morning that I'd be a sailor when I grew up, a mariner, you know, like Peterday, only I'd prefer to have both my legs."
"You'd find it more convenient, perhaps."
"You know all 'bout oceans, and waves, and billows, don't you, Uncle Porges?"
"Well, I know a little."
"And are you ever seasick, like a landlubber?"
"I used to be, but I got over it."
"Was it a very big ship that you came over in?"
"Oh, no, not so very big, but she's about as fast as anything in her class, and a corking sea boat."
"What's her name?"
"Her name?" repeated Bellew. "Well, she was called the Sylvia."
"That's an awful pretty name for a ship."
So. But I have learned a prettier, and, next time she puts out to sea, we'll change her name, eh, my Porges?"
"We?"
cried Small Porges, looking up with eager eyes.
"Do you mean you'd take me to sea with you, and my Auntie Anthea, of course?"
"You don't suppose I'd leave either of you behind, if I could help it, do you? We'd all sail away together, wherever you wished."
"Do you mean," said Small Porges, in a suddenly awed voice, "that it is your ship, your very own?"
"Oh, yes."
"But, do you know, Uncle Porges, you don't look as though you had a ship for your very own, somehow."
"Don't I?"
"You see, a ship is such a very big thing for one man to have for his very own self, and has it got masts, and funnels, and anchors?"
"Lots of them."
"Then please, will you take me and Auntie Anthea sailing all over the oceans?"
"Just so soon as she is ready to come."
"Then I think I'd like to go to Nova Zembla first. I found it on my joggraphy to day, and it sounds nice and far off, doesn't it?"
"It does, Shipmate," nodded Bellew.
"Oh, that's fine!" exclaimed Small Porges, rapturously. "You shall be the captain, and I'll be the shipmate, and we'll say 'aye, aye' to each other, like the real sailors do in books, shall we?"
"Aye, aye, Shipmate," nodded Bellew again.
"Then please, I mean Captain, what shall we name our ship? I mean the new name."
"Well, my Porges, I mean, of course, Shipmate, I rather thought of calling her Hallo! Why, here's the Sergeant." Sure enough, there was Sergeant Appleby sitting under the shade of King Arthur, but who rose, and stood at attention as they came up. "Why, Sergeant, how are you?" said Bellew, gripping the veteran's hand. "You are half an hour before your usual time to day. Nothing wrong, I hope?"
"Nothing wrong, Mr. Bellew, sir, I thank you. No, nothing wrong, but this is a memorable occasion, sir. May I trouble you to step behind the tree with me, for half a moment, sir?"
Suiting the action to the word, the Sergeant led Bellew to the other side of the tree, and there, screened from view of the house, he, with a sudden, jerky movement, produced a very small leather case from his pocket, which he handed